Gonna give a little backstory. I live with my boyfriend, his brother, his mom, and her boyfriend in an arrangement that was meant to help us save money for the year. Since COVID hit our county, his mom and her boyfriend were hit hard financially. My job has not been affected, healthcare, but I picked up their side of the bills to keep us afloat for 3 months. His mom's boyfriend has recently traveled to Florida to visit his father. My boyfriend and I have been getting mixed answers on when he is due to return. We find out yesterday that he's planning to come back to the house this Sunday and will not be quarantining. We asked if he could kindly stay somewhere else because we don't want to potentially be exposed to COVID, and I have a coworker I work closely with who has just returned from leave due to an aggressive cancer. I simply cannot take a risk like letting him back immediately. BF's mom completely freaked out on us and snapped that he has no money, so he has to come back here. He will wear a mask the whole time and stay in the room. Mind you, this man was gone for most of the month and most likely did not quarantine when he arrived in Florida either. I have strong doubts he will follow protocol. He coughs without covering his mouth and blows his nose in the shower. BF and I don't want to be around. We are leaving for an Airbnb for 2 weeks, the time needed for her BF to quarantine, and will only be back for a couple of days before we get the key to our apartment. BF has informed her that we will not be paying rent next month nor any other utilities because she is putting everyone at risk by being stubborn and will not listen to reason about this. Of course he was screamed at for that. She said we were sabotaging the house finances and are selfish. It seems like she only cares about the money she can get from us and not our health and safety. And doesn't care about me potentially killing my coworker, but lol. Although we know if we don't give our side $1,000 plus it will put her in a tough bind, we're trying to let her see that her actions have consequences. He is done, I am done. It looks like he's reached the tipping point and wants absolutely nothing to do with her anymore. We don't care what happens after we move, but right now we're both feeling guilty as hell when we know we aren't being unreasonable here. Edit to add, she does not own this house. We rent from a private landlord. The next story is about a mom and its title is, She Purposefully Gave Me the Wrong Recipe. I post occasionally about my mom simply named Becky. She has passed away, but on occasion I think about some of the abuse or crap I experienced and thought I'd share. Today I made sand tart cookies and this memory came to mind and I had to share. Growing up my mom would make these cookies she called sand tarts. They are a firm cookie much like a sugar cookie. Not too sweet, so good for icing. I always loved them. I've not found a recipe like them or anything called sand tarts, so I have no idea where she got the recipe. Anyway, years ago I wanted to make them and asked for the recipe. You never knew what mood you'd find her in. She'd either be nice and chipper, moody, insulted victim, angry, severely depressed, or nasty and vindictive. It was always a lottery. You never knew what Becky you'd get. She must have fallen in one of her moods when I asked, but she sent me the recipe anyway. I made it, but it didn't taste right. The texture was off. I asked if it was the right recipe and she nastily replied, "Of course." I offended her. Yuppie. Many years go by and she passed away. I cleaned out her house and brought home her recipe box. Eventually I got around to going through it when I find the sand tart recipe. I decided to compare it to the one she gave me and it was a completely different recipe. It's not like she couldn't find it, she just didn't want me to have it. She must have been in her vindictive mood that day. Sideway glance emoji. We are talking like the recipe she gave me called for baking powder, this one does not, etc. The next story is titled, Mill says dog died, I find him at the pound 4 days later. Backstory. My dear husband has an ugly history with his stepmother, who is a terrible person. His father was a really great man who has since passed. There are a few other dog-related stories in their history, but this was the only one I was involved in. We adopted a beagle named Winston from the shelter when he was already over 12 years old. His owner had passed and he was so sweet and sad we decided to take him home. He was with us for about a year and had a few health problems but nothing major. One weekend we went out of town and asked our in-laws to watch Winston while we were gone. When we got home my Phil was reluctant to return him as they had bonded over the 3-day weekend. My in-laws had a small shepherd dog at the time named Minnie. I hadn't ever heard them complain about her in the past, but when we picked up Winston my Mill started making a huge deal about how Minnie was digging holes in their yard, which wasn't some fancy yard but whatever. After a week or so of Phil bugging my dear husband we decided to trade Winston for Minnie. I figured it was a quiet environment for him being a senior and I hated to see Minnie wind up in a shelter, which was what I suspected would happen. They had Winston for about a year when my dear husband and Phil went on a trip together. A few days after they left my Mill called me all upset. She said that Winston had a seizure and she took him to the vet and the vet wound up putting him down. I was in shock. He had one very mild seizure when we had him and I knew he had a few when he was with them, but they said he was being medicated. After we got off the phone I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with her story. She added the detail that the vet didn't charge her for putting him down because he felt sorry for her. It struck me as an odd, unnecessary detail. I decided to call their regular vet and ask about what happened. They told me that they hadn't seen Winston and didn't know what I was talking about. I decided to call another vet in that same area, but I had to leave a message. This was on Friday afternoon. The vet was closed over the weekend and the boys returned home on Sunday. My dear husband and I went over the story and both picked out things that we thought didn't add up. My dear husband asked his dad which vet she took him to and he said it was the first one I called. Monday morning the second vet's office called me back. I asked if someone had brought in a beagle having a seizure, and after a pause the woman told me that a woman in a bathrobe and slippers, no doubt my Mill, had brought in a beagle and said she hit it with her car and didn't know who it belonged to. They turned it into the pound. The pound is not open on Monday, so I had to wait until they opened on Tuesday to see if it was really him. I was there as soon as they unlocked the doors. When I walked into the dog kennels I heard him baying and burst into tears. I couldn't believe that after everything he had been through, he had to spend 4 days in the pound abandoned again. It cost me over $200 to get him out, which we did not have to spend, but there was no way I was leaving him. When I got home my husband couldn't believe his eyes. We took him straight over to my in-laws to confront her. She dug in and said that he was having a seizure, that the vet told her he was putting him down but he must have lied. We knew we weren't getting anywhere, so we left with Winston and went NC for about a year. My dear husband still had a relationship with his dad, but we never trusted her again. So we wound up with both dogs and Winston was totally fine. He lived 2 more years before he developed cancer and had to be put down. Minnie never dug a single hole in my yard. This next crazy story is titled, My Sister-in-Law is My Stepdaughter. First time poster and I'm just lost. My in-laws are going through a divorce. They're both nasty people in their own right, and my father-in-law was trying to weasel his way out of paying child support. A paternity test was done on all 4 of their children. He reached out to us last weekend to share his findings. We found out that my Sil was my husband's daughter. He'd have been 14 when she was conceived. My mother-in-law is refusing to answer any questions that came from this bombshell and is hiding behind her lawyer. My husband says he never had sex with his mother but did engage in certain practices with his mother that led to him becoming estranged with her since before I met him. I just don't know where to go from here or what to do. Wow, this was really shocking. How would you react? Comment down below your opinion. This next story is about a Mill who thinks that she is immune to cancer. I'm fighting cancer. An early stage, fortunately, so things should go well. Right now I'm going through chemo, which means I'm losing my hair. Today I got sick and tired of finding hair everywhere I go, so I decided to just shave it off and call it a day. It's not so bad as I thought it would be. I kinda like this look actually. My husband is away for a job trip and will be back after a month or so, but my 20-year-old son has a few days off before he goes back to college and he's staying in our house. Mil came over, saw me without hair and just burst into laughter. She was laughing aloud as if she just heard the funniest joke ever. She was like, "Oh my God, you look as if God was drunk when he made a human. You look like a damn shaved egg. You look like an inmate that has got out of prison after decades. Jesus, you look so silly." Before I managed to say something, my son heard what Mil said and was like, "Shut your effing mouth before I do it for you. Look at your own mug in the mirror, like a scarecrow from the yard of a loony bin." Mil wasn't expecting this, of course. She stopped laughing and pouted that he can't talk to his grandma like that. She said that I must be ready for comments like this because people immediately will see I'm ill. My son was like, "Well, be careful, don't kick the bucket yourself." Mil said, "Oh honey, I'll be fine. I have no family history of cancer so I don't have to worry about that." Well, guess what, Mil? Neither do I. In my entire family I'm the first person to have cancer. When I got sick, I tracked my family's medical history as far as I could, and from what I found, no one of my relatives has ever had cancer. Of course, I don't wish it upon her, but her thinking is kinda flawed. Yes, maybe it puts you at less risk of getting cancer than someone who has a family history of it, but it doesn't grant you immunity. Cancer doesn't discriminate. This is a nasty trait of my Mil. Whenever she sees someone with a disability or someone who because of a health condition visually looks different than others, or just someone who has a major illness, she often sneers and comments that this person must have done this or that to end up in that condition and it's their own fault. It has always seemed so weird to me because you don't know what awaits you in the future. Today you're healthy and tomorrow you might not be able to get out of bed. Mil's so sure she's going to be fine at all times and that her health is the strongest of them all. It's like diseases don't exist to her, it's something that happens to everyone else, but her. Then she was like, "But really, wear a wig. You don't want to walk around looking like a bald alien. You're a woman after all." I told her that whether I wear a wig or not will be my choice and her comments are highly inappropriate and I don't have to tolerate it in my own house. Mil was like, "Jesus, stop being so dramatic. You know yourself people laugh at bald women. How about you just wear a wig and calm down?" My son said, "How about you get the F out of here? Be careful walking down the stairs, don't bump your already stupid head into something." I don't really understand why was it necessary to comment anything about my hair. And if she absolutely had to, she could do so without being mean. I wish she appreciated being healthy, as that can change at any minute. The next story is titled, "Mil Yells at Us Because We Are Horrible People." Hi all. I've decided to call my Mil Lucille after Arrested Development's Lucille Bluth because she's a narcissist who drinks, and belittles and infantilizes her son, my husband. A little backstory, my husband and I are living in his parents' northern home while we look for a house to purchase for ourselves. We've been house hunting since I first got pregnant with our now 13-month-old daughter. Needless to say, it's been a long slog in a very difficult housing market. We ended up in his parents' house as a last resort. They live in Florida part of the year, and spend the rest of the year in the house up north. They are planning to sell it, but Lucille has botched the sale, another story for another day. So it is my husband, me, our toddler, and his mother and father. My husband's sister and her family are visiting this week. He and his sister have had a complicated relationship since Lucille loves to pit them against each other. My Sil is thrilled to death with our daughter and has offered great parenting advice. Her children are teenagers and have had happier childhoods than Sil or husband had. Boo. Being around Lucille triggers my Sil. I wasn't there for the big blow up, but from what I gather, my husband needed to run errands, was encouraged by Lucille and Phil to leave my daughter with them since she would be in the care of 4 adults. So my husband leaves our daughter home and runs his errands. He comes home to find our daughter in the care of our 16-year-old niece and none of the other adults anywhere to be found. Lucille us taking a nap, Phil and Sil went shopping, Bill is working on his laptop. Our daughter is crying from exhaustion since no one is letting her nap. Lucille has this practice of going into my daughter's room while she is settling down for a nap and picking her up. Lucille will claim our daughter is crying, we should have more light in her room, turn off the CD she falls asleep to, etc. My husband and I have repeatedly told her to let our daughter sleep. So this time, she both ignored our standing instructions to let our daughter nap and did not relay them to my niece. So my husband comes home to an exhausted baby in the care of an overwhelmed teenager, and is pissed. Sil comes home, starts arguing with my husband about any number of child-rearing choices we have made. My husband yells back. Lucille wakes up from her nap, and joins Sil in yelling at my husband. During this time, I am at work and receiving texts from husband regarding what's going down. I'm annoyed that the adults pretty much dumped the care of a toddler on a 16-year-old. No matter how mature she is, some adult backup would have been wise, especially from Lucille and Phil who know our daughter's schedule and signals. So I text back my husband, telling him that next time he runs errands to take our daughter with him. He relays this to Lucille who says she will talk to me when I come home from work. I come home from work, and Lucille confronts me about telling my husband to take our daughter with him next time he runs errands. And oh, is she pissed? She demands that my husband join me so that she can yell at us both. She is angry, not only about my husband yelling at her earlier, but overall about how we have treated her. According to her, we don't clean up after ourselves, the house was a mess when we came back from Florida. Untrue, duh. My husband starts yelling back at her, defending Iz, while also pointing out that he is just doing what she likes to do to him, yelling. Lucille calls my Phil into the room for backup. They continue to yell at my husband, going on about what horrible people we are because, apparently, we aren't giving Lucille the treatment she feels she is entitled to. It should surprise no one that Lucille has a massive sense of entitlement. And during all of this, I am tuning them out doing the Kimmy Schmidt, "I'm not really here" chant. Because I'm a grown woman with a child, a law license, a public interest law career, a mortgage pre-approval, and do ducking clean up after myself regardless of what Lucille says to me. In other words, I do not deserve to be yelled at or talked down to. But do I yell back? No. Because if I had, Lucille would spend the rest of her life telling the story of how her daughter-in-law called her a stupid witch. Instead, I let my husband and his parents have the same codependent unhealthy fight they always have. Low blows and all. Lucille's angry my husband won't just shut up and let her control his life. He's right pissed that Lucille tries to control him. So once husband storms out of the room to check on our daughter, I'm left with my hot and bothered in-laws who are now dramatically pronouncing husband's accusation that they're ruining his life. And then they turn on me, trying to gaslight me on what happened that afternoon, claiming they didn't leave our daughter alone with our niece. And they care about our daughter, have her best interests in mind. I calmly explained the issues husband and I have, including their refusal to respect her nap schedule, and refusal to adhere to our daughter's feeding schedule. They tried to make it look like we were the ones making bad parenting decisions, and so on. I calmly explained our reasoning behind our parenting decisions, and repeated that they needed to respect our wishes. They then tried to complain about my husband. I told them that they needed to discuss these issues with husband. Rinse, repeat. They then retreated to their bedroom, still upset. This next story is from the same author and it's about her mill trying to sell her grandmother's silver. Husband just reminded me of the time Lucille tried to sell my grandmother's silver. The scene, 2 years ago on Mother's Day, or as Lucille sees it, just another day to heap abuse on husband with no accountability for it. 2 things had happened earlier that spring. 1. Husband, who was then fiancé, called off our engagement following an epic fight between us. What was the fight about? I wanted him to be less enmeshed with Lucille. By Mother's Day our engagement was back on, although the wedding had been called off for the time being. And 2. My 90-year-old grandmother moved into assisted living and gave me her set of silver. I love my grandmother and treasure that silver because it came from her. So Mother's Day rolls around and we take Lucille and Phil out for sushi. Lucille, emboldened by a holiday celebrating what a great mother she is, acts like a right ass the entire meal. First off, she learned that the sushi place was BYOB, which for some reason upset her, despite copious pre-gaming with Pinot Grigio. We order our food arrives, I head to the bathroom. For some reason, during my early days on the Lucille show, I would get sick during meals with her, like my body was smarter than my head. Husband fills me in later on what happened while I was in the bathroom. Lucille first demanded to know why I was still wearing my engagement ring. Now, husband had already told Lucille that our engagement was back on, but since that didn't conform with her favored version of reality, husband must be lying. Lucille moved on, and began to fixate on my husband's safe, where he had locked away his coin collection and my grandmother's silver. Lucille had tried to pick up the safe and wondered why it was so heavy. She demanded that my husband give her a copy of the keys to the safe so that if anything happened to him, she'd be able to open it. Major concern troll face. Oh, why wouldn't husband give Lucille the key, she wondered. She bullied my husband into telling her that my grandmother's silver was in the safe. He ordered her not to say anything about it to me. Around that time I get back to the table. Lucille explains that she put a couple of the sushi pieces she had ordered but didn't like on my plate for me to eat, and an eerily bright expression overtakes her. What pattern is my grandmother's silver? I was mildly confused, to say the least. How did Lucille know about my grandmother's silver? I said I did not know the pattern. Pattern wasn't really important to me, it was the sentimental value. Husband shoots daggers in Lucille's direction. It comes time to pay for our meal. Since husband is treating, he reaches for his wallet. Lucille announces, loudly, husband, you have no money. Phil, you pay. Grins at husband. Phil, without saying a word, pulls out his credit card, pays for the meal. A small mercy, we had taken separate cars. In the parking lot, husband filled me in on what had gone down while I was in the bathroom. And explained that Lucille wanted to know the pattern of my grandmother's silver so that she could sell it. He then gave me a quick rundown of all of the things Lucille had sold out from under him in the past, which planned to steal my silver and sell it. An epilogue. A couple of months later, husband mentioned to Lucille how she had been on Mother's Day.